Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
It's the Smucker's Uncrustables podcast with your host, Uncrustables. Okay, today's guest is rough around the edges. Please welcome Crust.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic, he's round with soft pillowy bread.
Hey.
Filled with delicious PB&J.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you can take him anywhere.
Why'd you invite?
And we are out of time.
Are you really cutting me off?
Uncrustables are the best part of the sandwich. Sorry, Crust.
1,
2,
3,
4.
Monster movie.
Fun time, go! Monster movie.
Fun time, go. Monster
Movie.
Fun time.
Go!
Monster movie. Fun time, go.
With Precious D and Honeybee.
Fun time, go!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and neighbors, welcome to Monster Movie Fun Time Go. I'm your host, Precious D, and we're doing one of those role-playing episodes that we do every now and then here. My guest today is Johnathan Wright. He is kickstarting the latest version of his game called Mecha versus Kaiju. Welcome back to the show, Johnathan.
Hello, thank you.
So you got a Kickstarter going? I know you have a Patreon that you use to develop this version of the game, and now it's ready to go and it's on Kickstarter. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it and what makes it different from the other versions of the game?
Yeah, so Mecha vs. Kaiju is a game where you create anime characters with giant customized monster fighting robots. And the key here is that this game is designed to be narrative. So it's not a tactical game, it's not a minis game, although you're welcome to add those elements in. Those are optional. But at its core, you create an anime character based on anime archetypes, and you create your own giant robot, and you fight giant monsters. That is really the log line of the game. Everything else is options that you can decide to add in. One of the really great things with having a Patreon is that I've spent the past 3 years working with some amazing gamers to really refine this system and to create something that allows people to build their own adventures, and that's really the most rewarding thing about it. You know, everybody is just like, oh, I got this idea, I want to make this group or this monster, or and they're from all over the world, so you get like people in Holland that are saying, yeah, it's like they're going to be attacking this one place. I got a mate in India who ran an entire campaign on his Twitch channel. So yeah, it really allows you to create your own version of like those amazing stories you see on in the movies and on TV.
And who doesn't want to build their own kaiju? So tell us a little bit about the system that you're using, because you've used Fate before and True 20 and even Cypher system, but this is new, but kind of based on something we may have seen before, something we might be familiar with.
So Fate was a real inspiration because of its emphasis on narrative, and I wanted to maintain that. But there just kind of wasn't enough options for Fate, and I mean that's by design. It's designed to be something that is very light, and I really wanted something that was a little more crunchy, that would allow people to kind of play more with dice tricks and come up with cool combinations and things like that. I'm also a grognard, and I've taken heat for this, but I used 5e as sort of the spine of the system, and I can't really take full credit for the mechanics. Jeremy Forbing is a really good friend of mine, and he's been a game designer working with D&D for 10 years. And we've talked a lot about our love of D&D, but our frustration with its limitations. And we both had this abiding love for modern storytelling narrative games like Cypher System or Cortex, which is another stab I took at a new system. So part of it was licensing, like the licensing deals for Cypher and Cortex were just not favorable when I was starting 3 years ago. So we had to do something. We decided to do something independent. Have you played D&D?
Have I played D&D?
I always ask that because there are some people that are not familiar with the 5e version. I think everybody, pretty much all nerds have taken a stab at it at one point or another. There's a mechanic in 5e where you have a proficiency bonus, and there's an option where you can switch it out with dice. So instead of having a +2 proficiency bonus, you have a D4. So you roll that along with your D20, and maybe you get like a +4 instead of a +2. Maybe you only get a +1. So it adds a little randomness to it. Well, we took that mechanic and we applied it to all of the traits. So like if you can imagine a fighter is rolling like a D8 or a D10 when they're rolling their strength. And then maybe I have a D8 for a longsword and they're rolling that with their D20. We took that idea and applied it to storytelling mechanics so that characters, rather than having traits with particular numbers, have aspects that describe them. So, so instead of like strength, or maybe like instead of Dex, +4 or Dex D8, they have like, Hotshot Pilot D8. So mechanically, it all works the same way, but narratively, now you just have a ton of new options that have opened up. And when you're creating your character, you're creating both from a mechanical point of view, plugging things into particular slots that have dice connected to them, but you're really crafting a character and a character's personality, and that becomes the core of how you're playing.
Okay. Now, just to be clear, I have played every version of D&D except the 2024 update, and I guess you'd say I haven't played OD&D or Zero D&D. I started with Basic sometime in the early 80s. So yeah, no, I was on board with 5th edition, during the playtest during that transition period. But I'm playing Tales of the Valiant now. I'm not participating with Hasbro anymore.
I totally get that.
Yeah, it's.
Well, I understand because, like I say, I've gotten heat for using 5e, and I get it. Like Hasbro, really messed up. Like I say, I'm a grognard, and I love D&D, and I also wanted to have my game be open to importing, the decades of content that are there, and to allow people to use the giant monster and robot rules in D&D. So there's crossover rules there. Anybody who doubts though, they're like, oh, I hate 5e, and I always go like, yep, I get it. Try the starter game and see how it works. Yeah, because
I like 5e. I love 5e. I think it's great. Mm-hmm. It's just I'm not happy with Hasbro right now, but I am absolutely behind playing variations of 5e made by other people. I'm completely behind that, and I wasn't aware anybody wasn't behind it. So That's
There's some
frustrating.
people that are just there are some folks that are just like adamant against it, and
Well, some people just don't like 5e to begin with.
right.
But then there's others who are just mad for because of Hasbro reasons that have nothing to do with the system
For
itself.
very justifiable reasons, yeah. I mean, and there's nothing that will make you hate something more than like some new guy coming in and like trying to mess with it.
Yeah.
Especially for financial reasons. There's no game reason to do the things that they were trying to do, and in fact, it harmed the game. But they were trying to squeeze more money out of it.
Yeah, but then they just kept. It was just one thing after another, even after they fixed that initial mistake. Just one thing after another, because I tried to give them a second chance, and then they blew it. But back to this dice mechanic. This sounds it's reminding me a little bit. Didn't Alternity have a similar mechanic? And I think
they did, yeah. And in fact, I think a lot of the designers in 5e came out of Alternity as well. Like you check the credit pages, for older books, and you'll see a lot of crossovers. Sean K. Reynolds was I think was involved with that as well. So yeah, and like I say, this mechanic, it was like a big part of Cortex, but it was like there in in previous games, even before that. So we just applied it in a way that would allow players to to use that as fuel for their storytelling. I mean that's the real goal. When you look at an MVK character, the first set of traits is their drives, and the idea is like, what is fueling my character's actions? So when you look at the drives, it's a series of statements about that character's personality. Like, give you an example. Lieutenant Ace Kasaragi, he is our prototypical fighter pilot. So, the first drive is identity, who you are on the inside. And for him, it's unpredictable master of sky snark, which is what he calls it, because he's, his archetype is Hayakasu. He's the tease. So, he's good at pushing people's buttons. He can get people to either like him or hate him. And, depending on the circumstance, whether you're at a party or fighting a giant robot who like you want to distract, that can come in handy. Idiosyncrasy is what you are on the outside, and so that's always in a fiery rush. So even with just those two, you can kind of see when you are taking an action, there are options you have in your storytelling. Is this going to be like a fast and intense action? Is it going to be something where you're trying to you're trying to like trip somebody up? Even though both of those have the same die, the game result is going to be very different depending on your action and the outcome, and how how the opponent is going to respond to it.
Okay. I think Essence 20 also uses a similar D20 plus another die, depending on your skill level. That's the Renegade Studios that does Transformers and G.I. Joe and My Little Pony and Power Rangers. They really highlight that Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Power Rangers all use the same system. They don't mention that My Little Pony also uses the same system.
I don't see why not. I mean, it's the perfect crossover.
I know. Right? Throw those toys in there too. Yeah, they left them out of the there's a book that tells you how, gives you suggestions for integrating the different worlds, and they left My Little Pony out of it.
Well, I imagine they probably, leave that. I'm sure the bronies will be able to figure it out. So,
Yeah. So why don't you tell us now, though, a little bit about the fluffy side of things, the world, the setting for
How
Mecha
long have you
versus
got?
Kaiju.
Um, I've been well. You mentioned True 20, which was 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been
Yeah.
I've been in this world for going on 20 years now. And even back then, the goal was the same. It was to create a world and to imagine a world where every giant monster movie really happened. And you guys have been covering some amazing recent monster movies. I mean, my hat is off to like how much digging you have done, over the past year with some just incredibly obscure stuff, and really emphasizing the world that that you could imagine. If you're going to Thailand, if you're going to India, if you're going to all these different places, and imagining this kind of thing. That was the goal of the setting. I'm also a credentialed history teacher, so I really dug into the alt history idea of this. So you start with a foundation, Godzilla 1954. So in 1954, a giant monster destroys Tokyo. And you basically work forwards and backwards in time from there. So I thought, origin, how does that happen? I have a deep love and respect for the Shinto faith. Just for personal reasons, it's one of my favorite spiritual beliefs. So I looked at the mythology of Japan and all the way back to its origins, and the Shinto creation myth of the heavenly kami dipping a spear into the ocean, the drops falling off, and it forms the Japanese islands, and that's the first land on the planet. There are legends about the Oni, devils that are trying to come into the world and take it over, ogres, kind of like humanoid monsters that threaten people. Combined all that together into sort of the mythological background, kind of all leading up to the origin of the Kaiju, which is at the end of World War II, a group of really evil folks decide that they're going to summon a demon to fight for Japan. And they summon it in Hiroshima at the moment that the first atomic bomb is being dropped. So as the demon is stepping through the portal, the bomb hits, kills the summoners, bathes the monster in radiation. So it is uncontrolled and insane, and begins, tearing across Japan. Japanese government contacts, United States and goes, please call off the monster you dropped on us, to which the Americans go, huh? So what follows is 3 days of rapid negotiations and deployment where the Japanese military is moving the Kaiju to a safe place. The safest place they can drop it is the now evacuated city of Nagasaki. And so the military corrals the Kaiju in Nagasaki. A second atomic bomb drops and destroys the monster, and the crisis is averted. Except that the agents of those same evil folks steal genetic material and take it away to a secret medical facility at the Chosin Reservoir. This is where my history teacher kicks in. Chosin Reservoir is the site of the worst defeat of the U.S. military during the Korean War. And that defeat was caused by unleashing a giant monster on them, which they have grown a new version. So that's really sort of the genesis of the Kaiju, is like genetic material from this irradiated demon is mutated and grown into multiple forms of Kaiju that torment the world, for the remainder of the century. Pretty much every giant monster outside the United States is a variation on that monster idea. Um, so, doctors, scientists creating giant moths and giant snakes, and anything that you could see, that wasn't from the U.S. Is kind of a variation of that. And in modern times now, they are breeding in the wild, so like new and wild kaiju are coming up, kind of randomly. I excluded the United States because the U.S. giant monsters are so idiosyncratic. Like, all of them are nuclear bomb test causes X. And so, all of our monsters, kind of come from that idea. So, so the history there is nuclear tests cause giant insects, what they call mutagiants. The first outbreak is giant ants, that terrorize the American Southwest and eventually find their way to the LA sewers, where they're destroyed. But and if they had stopped then, it never would have happened. But we never listened to to those warnings. So nuclear tests continue. I looked into the history of nuclear tests. I actually went to the Atomic Museum in Las Vegas. Highly recommended for any genre fan, because it is just packed full of inspiration as well as just artifacts from that time period. So looking at the timeline, there's a time where they were talking about nuclear, like fanning above ground nuclear tests, and the lead up to that deadline. The year before that deadline was met, a lot of people don't know this. There was more than one more than one above ground nuclear test a week for the year preceding the testing that banned, those tests. So if you were living in Las Vegas, you could have seen 2 nuclear explosions at the test range in a week's time.
My mother and her sister were taken outside once to see a bomb going off in the distance. And now
it would have been a sight.
My aunt has health problems now because of it.
Oh, man. So, yeah, I mean, it was, and I mean, yeah, like, you can just look at those numbers and, like, just feel the hubris, like, oozing off of the page. Yeah. So that triggers what they call the mutagiant explosion in 1958, and just giant mantises, giant ants, spiders. I mean, just all of these mutated insects just erupt out of the American Southwest, and it is, there is unable to stop them. What ends up happening is they evacuate the entire American Southwest. So all those states, Arizona, New Mexico, that whole area, even all the way to the Mississippi, that region is emptied. During the mutagiant outbreak, these insects, they basically just start swarming south, because they're insects. They're going where it's warm. And they are stopped by a combination of U.S. military and the Texas Rangers working together with the Mexican military. And they basically, like, hold the line at kind of like right at that that southern border area, and and that becomes what they call the central control region. So there's basically what they call Continental Rangers, which is the new internal defenders of that border area, preventing the mutagiants from escaping. The area within that is completely barren of life, except for Salt Lake City. The Mormons never go. Their city was built like a fortress anyway, so they just wall it up, and they've got a water supply, and and they can grow food within kind of the confines of that city area. So so they ain't going. And what happens is this whole area is just rampant with giant insects, and Continental Rangers try and stop it, but they don't have enough people. And Native American tribes go, hey, I see you've got a lot of land here, and it looks like you could use some help in controlling these giant insects. So let's make a deal. And so that whole central and southwest area that is now the United States becomes the First Nation. And Native Americans return to that land, and they internally cut down on the mutagiant population, while the Continental Rangers kind of control the border area and prevent giant monsters from escaping there. So all of that was just was in keeping with my my alt history take here, and just looking at wanting to map giant monster movies onto events, but then kind of like looking at, okay, if that happened, what's the end result? And so I hope that the world, when people look at it, I hope it makes sense to them.
Want to live better?
We got a lot of work to do.
Join Chris Hemsworth in National Geographic's new Disney Plus original series, Limitless. Live better now.
I'm diving headfirst into cutting-edge science to uncover 3 powerful secrets to living better right now. The growth that occurs through any challenging experience is really what we seek.
Chris Hemsworth stars in Limitless. Live better now. Streaming August 15th on Disney Plus and Hulu.
It's showtime.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
I think it will. It sounds like you've put a lot of work into it. And there's a lot of this is detailed in the Fate version of the game.
Yeah, I had 2 books, one Fate of America and Fate of the World. Fate of the World was a lot of fun because one of my favorite areas there is Africa. Because, if a giant monster shows up in 1954 and it becomes obvious that there's going to be more of them, then the logical step for Europe is to pull out of all of its colonies, retrench, and protect the homeland. Because they're not going to spend money to protect a colony, that could more easily be attacked by a kaiju. They're going to protect their own, their own borders. The European Union was already a thing in the 1950s. So that just gets accelerated. The UN and cooperation between nations improves. But my alt history brain again kicks in, like, okay, like, mid 50s, all the colonizers leave Africa, and Africa is left to its own devices, but with international support, because nobody in Europe wants giant monsters to just kind of like use Africa as like a breeding ground or something like that. So it's in the world's best interest to protect the coastline.
Okay.
So they figure out this idea of bastions, which are basically just big fortresses, and they create they create these little like island forts, and they have boats patrolling. They call them K-boats, and they patrol the shoreline. And if a kaiju comes close, they herd the kaiju towards one of these bastions, and then the bastions blow the heck out of them. So like, they're not protecting the whole shoreline. They're concentrating fire and then herding the kaiju into that kill zone. So maybe they kill it, or maybe they just drive it off. But either way, with a tactic like that, that's, and again, trying to think of it logically, that's a 1950s tactic that can defend a coastline. And it's successful. They refine it over the years with more bastions and better boats, but that's basically how they protect the coastal regions of the world. And Africa basically kind of returns to a set of borders that are based on natural environment and language group. So the map of Africa I created, I used the language groups within Africa as the basis. Just figuring that, like, people are gonna group up based on people they know, people they're comfortable with. Figured the Mediterranean side of Africa, those are very old, well-established nations with a very high degree of international political connections. So things like Libya and Egypt are still have the same borders because it's in their best interest to maintain those borders. Within kind of the interior, those kind of like people created their own nations and kind of hashed it out, peacefully among themselves, with the idea that, like, if we don't work together, then the giant monsters are going to be able to take us more easily. South America, reading up on South American history, there was an economist who took over Argentina, and basically way back in the early 1950s wanted to create this sort of Pan-American confederation in South America. And he almost succeeded. Other countries outside of that didn't like that idea, and so like kind of put the kibosh on it. But here, they're able to succeed. So South America kind of like is very independent, and that really just Asia is is kind of the core area. So like I'm not getting into that too much, but like that kind of leaves communist countries, Soviet Union primarily. What do you do with that from this sort of alt history perspective? And there I looked at, obviously, South Korea, everybody blames them for the giant monsters. So they are probably the #1 most hated country in the world. China, during the Korean War, when MacArthur pushes up to the Chinese border, not only does the Chinese army come over to attack, but also Mao's million mutant militia. And the idea of that was just Mao found a cache of radioactive material when he was up in the mountains, and lacking a better purpose for it, basically experimented on his own people. it's, and historically, it's not it's not a great stretch that, Mao's the kind of guy that would do this exact sort of thing. So he basically makes an army of mutants that he can, use to defend China, and he unleashes them during the Korean War. So everybody knows about that, and so China is just like, you did what to your own people? That's horrible. So communism has already got two big black eyes in the in the eyes of the rest of the world. And the thing that really seals the deal is Czechoslovakia and the crackdown of the democratic movements there in the early 60s. After that, no country has any truck with the communist ideology. It is completely, it has no force for influencing people and trying to get them, on the communist side. This is basically my answer to the question. Well, if America isn't there as a superpower, what happens with Russia? But again, it's in keeping with the logic of the world. So in 2020X, which is kind of the new era for Mecha versus Kaiju, there are no superpowers. Everybody's pretty much at kind of an even keel, in part because energy is available freely thanks to Professor Rampo Chiari, the creator of the Mecha in Japan. He insisted that the power source for the Mecha be released freely to the world. So there is abundant free energy in the world, and every city is basically powered by its own reactor that provides safe and clean energy. So, no energy crisis. So from my point of view, at this point in, like you said, when I released those two books several years ago, I thought I've covered the entire world. It's wonderful, and I know exactly what happens. And then when I started with the new edition, I made contact with a lot of the people who I had. Who had been playing the game previously. And one of them was a guy named Chirag Asnani, who is an Indian gamer, publisher, and game designer. And he joined the Patreon at the ace level. And the aces are kind of like the core playtesters. We've had an online campaign for about 3 years now, where we try and meet a couple times a month, and this campaign has been going on for 3 years now. Chirag joined, and unfortunately, because he lives in India, and I had another player that lived in South Africa, who had joined earlier. There's no way that we could set up a time where the U.S., South Africa, and India all sort of like could come together at the same time.
Right.
So, and because Chirag had joined after this other gentleman, I had to kind of give the first guy precedent. But Chirag and I have been working together for a long time. In fact, we're planning to do a book together sometime soon. But as an Indian, he said, "Hey, I've got some ideas for what was happening in India, kind of starting in the 1970s, going back to the partition, dealing with Chinese Maoist rebels. So, kind of using Indian history and incorporating these Buddhist sort of mythical mecha, what we'll call spirit moving machines. And I think it would really tie in great, especially if we could do like Rakshasa, sort of like the monstrous thing. And he's sharing all of these amazing ideas. And I'm realizing that there is a massive empty space in my map. In all of that stuff that I had been doing, I never once looked at India. It's
Well,
only 1/7 of the world's population, right? It's not like it's a big deal. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I'm totally.
It's a billion people here or there.
Right. I mean, it's only it's just a billion folks there, and with the culture that's stretched back for thousands of years. So I'm totally upfront about it. And I'm just like, okay, Chitta, you're blowing my mind here, and I realize like how sort of like culturally myopic I've been. So first of all, thank you for that, and secondly, I want to use all of that stuff. So. So part of the joy of Mecha versus Kaiju has been working with these amazing gamers and incorporating their stuff in. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I've sent out to all the backers and all my patrons is just the layout of the book. Every page is going to have at the bottom of the page is going to have on one side Kaiju fun facts, and on the other side is going to be Mecha milestones. So every page of the book is going to have sort of little historical tidbits sprinkled throughout. So this whole sort of background that I've been telling you about, I originally planned for the first sort of preview copy of the book. It was only 130 pages because I wanted to cut it down as tightly as I could. So the core system's 130 pages, and then this history that I created, I sort of sprinkled through as Kaiju fun facts and Mecha milestones. But the first stretch goal for the Kickstarter is I want to double the book size. 130 pages. I've got the complete system in here, but it's not everything that I want. And it's not everything that's on the Patreon right now. The Patreon document is twice that size. Like, for example, character creation. We've got, we use anime archetypes. So remember I was talking about Ace Kasaragi earlier, and I said that he was the Hayakasu, the tease. That's one archetype. So if you, anime viewers for years have categorized characters into these archetypes, and they even have web pages of anime archetypes that you can go to, and they have here's the kind of person this archetype is, here's examples. And anime viewers love to look for, like, if they introduce a new character, they're like, oh yeah, what kind of character is this going to be? And of course that makes it easy to subvert those expectations, but sometimes playing them up is fun too. And it's just like kind of a little meta game that the anime fans play. So from a game design point of view, that makes a great foundational character concept. So the Hayakasu, the tease, somebody who gets people either mad at them or intrigued by them or what have you. The Otosan, the father figure, he's stern and upright, but he also looks after people. So he has an ability that lets him protect others. There's the Dorodoro, which is the secret mean one. So like they're not friendly on the outside, but really on the inside they're like stabbing you in the back. So that's a character archetype. So so we use that as the foundation for character design. In the core book, the 130-page core book, we've got a dozen archetypes. But in the full Patreon document, we've got 17. So there's 5 more archetypes that couldn't fit into the book. First stretch goal, we're going to include those. We're going to include more pre-made powers. I've got 50 sample abilities in the core book. I want to double that to 100. So that's things like and that introduces like the whole how do you make powers and stuff. If we got time, I can go into that really quickly. You want to make a superpower, you just combine a perk and a drawback, and there's about it's about a total of 24 perks and drawbacks. Each one which is like one of those dice tricks I was talking about. So like add a d6 or boost a die from a d6 to a d8, or include an additional trait from your stats. So we've got a bunch of ways of manipulating the rules in very creative ways, but they're very simple. It's like Legos. So you combine one of those with a drawback, like once per scene, you can do this, or spend inspiration, because we use inspiration from 5e in order to do this. Maybe like give yourself a condition, like something, some problem in order to do this. Or like it only works in a particular situation. So you combine one perk, a mechanical benefit, with one drawback, a mechanical loss. Combine that with the narrative description for how the power works, and you can create anything that you want. Just by adding in perks and drawbacks, and then describing how it works in the world. So my goal is, and I think I've succeeded pretty well, is to create a power system that is completely customizable, so that you can basically describe any ability that you want. So every archetype has its own talent, its own thing that it does, and it's the way that it kind of does that better than anyone else. So more archetypes, more pre-made powers to kind of show people, what they can do and how they can do it. And then more sample giant robots. There's an extensive history to the group in Japan that's defending that country. The sort of core campaign for Mecha versus Kaiju is the Mecha Assault Force, which are the preeminent defenders of Japan since the mid-1960s, when they started as the anti-Kaiju force, just trying to figure out defenses for the country. And then this brilliant teenage boy, because of course it's a teenage boy, figures out the secret of creating giant robots. And naturally, his first giant robot is remote controlled from his watch. And then we, because like I grew up on Johnny Sacco and his flying robots, so I got to represent.
Exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
And just like and yeah, you can always tell a fan, if you just like show a picture of of giant robot fighting the giant bad guy on that last episode, and just ask, so did you cry? Because like that last episode of Johnny Sacco, I wept like a baby. So had to represent that. And then 1970s super robots like Shogun Warriors. Like I really like my first giant robot was Raideen. So I've got my homage to him, which is the super robot Kagutsuchi, which was went online in the 1970s, and so was defending Japan during that time period. Historically, giant monster movies end in like the mid 70s, and so in the MVK world, the kaiju just kind of stop attacking in the mid 70s, and so alt history wise, I look at how does the world respond to that. After 10 years, people are finally thinking, wow, maybe it's done. Maybe they died out. Ha! We're saved. And then of course 1984, Return of Godzilla, and the whole Heisei era kicks off, which for me is my personal favorite time period. I mean, I'd love to take a moment to aside. Like, what's your interpretation of the Heisei period? How do you like it?
What's mine?
Yeah.
What's mine? I like it fine. I don't have any problems with it. I enjoy all that stuff.
Well, you know, I'm growing up with comic books. I am a sucker for continuity, and of course, like with with Star Blazers was like an episodic saga. You know, where it wasn't like Speed Racer. Where Speed Racer would have 2-parters, maybe a 3-parter, but Star Blazers was just like this story just keeps going, and and the people are getting tired, and the ship is getting beat to hell, and like things are getting worse, and it's getting more desperate, and every time you turn that on the next episode, there's that feeling of just like amping up the anxiety, and I love that. And so the Heisei era, I watched 1984. That was the first Godzilla movie I saw on the big screen. So obviously had a huge effect. And then I heard like, they're making a sequel. And I mean, in the mid 1980s, how am I going to get a chance to see Godzilla versus Biollante? I mean, it's just like it's not coming over here. They're not bringing that movie over here. So that was when I started. Fortunately, started going to conventions, and conventions had like tapes and then later DVDs, and so like I was able to get the stuff from there, and I realized, hey, wait, Biollante is a direct sequel to Godzilla Returns. Like he comes out of that volcano and does stuff, and then like they say, yes, we found Godzilla's genetic material and combined it with this thing to create this thing, and like for a guy at that age, it just like really put the zap on my head. Like this is continuity, and then like all of the later movies carry that on, and you've got like and you've got the telepathic character Miki, who is showing up again and again and becoming more and more important to the storyline, and it's just like it was like this is a saga, so like for 15 years we got a beginning to end story of Godzilla with all of these characters that were inspired by Showa, but didn't need to directly connect to that. And there was also the fact that they were taking it seriously, and as a nerd in the 80s, where everybody is bagging on, whatever it is, whether it's, sci-fi or comics or role-playing games, like everybody's bagging on it, for one way or another. Like, they're calling you nerds, or they're worried that you're going to worship the devil, or, it was a tough time to be a nerd. And so to see a movie series that took the stuff that I loved seriously, that was important, and so that's the energy that I brought into Mecha versus Kaiju. That's why I spend so much time justifying everything that I can, filling in every plot hole that I can see in the setting, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, when they were writing Young Frankenstein, they described their rewriting process as hitting it with a hammer and seeing what breaks. Like they would interrogate every joke to make sure that it actually worked and why it worked. So I kind of bring that same sort of energy to setting design and game design, and that's why we've spent 3 years on this system, and it's gone through. Let me just take a really quick look here at my previous editions, because before I had a version that I was satisfied with, there were 10 like beta versions of Mecha versus Kaiju. Excuse me, there were 5 beta versions, and then like when the system was like standing on its own feet, I started naming it version 0.1, version 0.2, because there was still a lot more that needed to be done. And there were 7 iterations of that we went through until I finally had a version that I felt I could call version 1.0. So like a version of the rule set that was complete.
Yeah.
And that was a 3-year process getting there. And since we're currently on version 1.5, and that's with additional content that's been added into for our Patreons, and that's the version that's the version I really want to release for the Kickstarter. That's why our first stretch goal was the double-sided book, because with that, you're going to get more archetypes, you're going to get more pre-made powers, more mecha, more monsters, and importantly for the GM, more sort of edge cases and descriptions for how to run the game. Because, I got a lot of years of experience here, and I've been taking notes all the time, and I still got questions for myself, like on a GM document that I want to address one of these days, for like different directions to go in. Ideas about how do you create, how do you run the game? That's something that not every role-playing game has a big section on. What does it look like to run this game? Especially, what happens if a player does something unexpected? Because they will. How do you roll with that? So, like, the beginning of the GM section has the best GMing advice I ever got, and that is any reasonable player plan should have a reasonable chance of success. And this is my mantra when I'm running a game. I don't worry when I'm creating an adventure. I don't worry about how are the players going to deal with this, because after, what is it now, 40 years? 35 that I've been playing, I have faith that players are going to be able to figure something out that is far more clever than I can. I'm one guy, they are 3, 4, 5, 6 brains all working together, to solve a problem. And role players are, just notoriously really good problem solvers. So, so I don't worry about how they are going to get themselves out of the deal. I just approach it from the point of view that if their plan makes sense, that I'm going to give them a reasonable chance for them to pull it off. And then it's just a question of difficulty. Which kind of leads to mechanically, the difficulty level in the game. It's set with dice. I call them danger dice. You roll a d20 with some dice that represent the level of peril in the scene. It starts with a d6. If things are dangerous, you might boost it to a d8. If they're end of the world type stuff, it might be d10. And the number of those dice you're rolling depends on how many players you have. So if you have up to 3 players, you would roll 2 of these danger dice. If you have a group of 4 or more, you just roll 3 danger dice. And I've actually been running a fantasy game with this engine for, going on 2 years now. Campaign's almost over. And that's also been really helpful in refining the system and seeing, it's when things get bad, it gets tough. If you're rolling against, right now we're approaching the climax of this campaign, so the danger dice are up to 3d10 plus a d20. So I'm averaging over 20 in my die results, And people were getting frustrated until they figured out, hey, wait a minute, we can create like advantages for ourselves, and we can sort of layer these things on. So they started doing that, like working together, creating some big advantages, making sure everybody can use them, and then attempting the stuff. So again, that whole problem solving aspect of the role playing gamer comes in, and the system really shines when people are able to use it in creative ways. And so, that's the other thing I wanted to do with when I was building the system, is set up something where people can give themselves advantages, put complications on the bad guys, add aspects to the scene, kind of layer things up so that like when they're taking their actions, they can say, okay, I'm going to use these traits from me. I'm going to use this aspect in the scene. That guy's in trouble, so I'm going to, add this to my dice pool. I've got this advantage. I'm going to throw that one in. And so they're just throwing like huge handfuls of dice down, and that's just a very satisfying feeling just from a gamer point of view.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
So let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter itself.
Mm-hmm.
What are we funding here?
So
core book.
So the core book is already funded.
Right.
That one was funded in minutes because I've got some amazing followers and patrons. So the first stretch goal is a double sized core book. That's at 4,000. So right now, let's see, current Kickstarter number is 3146. So after 3 days, that's pretty good. If anybody's familiar with Kickstarter, it's just like there's usually like a real rush at the beginning, and then it's kind of steady growth from there. So we're in these steady growth. Part of the process, but we'll probably fund that double sized core rule book, probably within the week. Beyond that, the next stretch goal is the Mecha vs. Kaiju Gazetteer, and that is my take on the setting that we've been talking about. So adapting that information from Fate of the World and Fate of America into one world book, combined with my gamers from South Africa and India and people all over the world that are sharing information, and kind of incorporating all that together into what's happening in the world, and then including new mecha, new monsters, new powers, talents, and tools. Beyond that, the Mecha Assault Force Technical Manual would look at the history of both the Mecha Assault Force and the Anti-Kaiju Force. Would have a lot of new options for giant robots, and also a new campaign, which would be the Anti-Kaiju Force's sort of individual soldier level campaign. What would it be? What would it be like to be a soldier, with maybe like a high-powered gun, and maybe you've got power armor, but like on the whole, it's just kind of like you and your companions against the giant monsters. That one I have G.I. Joe as an inspiration. So there would be an evil organization dedicated to using the kaiju for world domination. So naturally, the anti-kaiju force would have to come up against them. So a real sort of GI Joe versus Cobra vibe on for that game. And then on the flip side, the big book of Kaiju. One of the first supplements I had for Fate Core was a series of books called Big Book of Kaiju, which detailed flying and sea and land based kaiju, all of them inspired by famous monsters of filmland. In fact, one of our Kickstarter exclusives with every backer is the Little Big Book of Kaiju, which is kind of an introduction to like all the big. So we'll have our homages to Godzilla and Mothra and King Kong, that we've been writing, combined with commentary from this organization called the Kaiju Hanta, which is that word is a kind of a Japanization of hunter, and so Kaiju Hanta is a group of Kaiju Taku, who are Kaiju otaku, Kaiju super fans, who since the 1950s have been collecting information about giant monsters. As you can imagine, in this world, the initial response of the government and the military was to lock down all information, all data about giant monster, deny. And the Kaiju Hunter were like, nah, we're not. This is the biggest thing in our lives, and so we're going to we got to seek it out. So people, Kaiju Taku all over the world would like go to the sites of giant monsters. They would collect soil samples, they'd take measurements, they would do all this stuff. And so they were civilians collecting scientific data. And eventually, because of, through basically, crowdsourcing their research, they collected more information than all the governments combined, and they were putting it out freely for everyone. So eventually, everyone's just like, okay, fine, we're going to work with you, and that's where the names come from. It's the Kaiju Taku who gave the kaiju their names and their titles. So that's why you have a Kaibutsu, King of the Kaiju. That is his actual official name, because that was the name that was given to him by the Kaiju Taku. So the conceit of the Big Book of Kaiju is that it's written from the files of the Kaiju Hanta. And so I was really inspired by Shadowrun. Did you ever play Shadowrun?
Yes.
So the books were all laid out like message boards. So you would have they'd be talking about, this is the way it is in in Seattle, here and blah 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 blah, and then somebody would break in with a comment and be like, yeah, that's what they want you to think. Well, here's what's really going on, and they would always have some like catchy name or handle or something like that. And I love the verisimilitude of that it pulls you into the world so that you're seeing it from multiple perspectives, and that's what that's how the Big Book of Kaiju is set up. It was in world. It was a zine, so it was basically just like people typing stuff up and mimeographing it and passing it out, mailing it. And today, of course, it's a computer bulletin board. So that's the format of the Big Book of Kaiju. It's the Kaiju Hanta's website, where they have postings for these monsters. They have the historical background, and then they have commentary by sort of key members of the Kaiju Hanta. And each one of those members represents kind of a particular take on the situation. So like there's one guy who's like there's one guy who's a retired mecha pilot, and there's another guy who's a scientist, another guy who's a teacher, another guy who's actually a member of this group called the Cult of the Beast God, who worship kaiju. and all of their opinions are on the page at the same time. So they're having a conversation about that particular kaiju. Some people might be sharing personal experiences, or maybe like disagreeing with the conclusions of the initial posting and coming up with different ideas. So the goal with that is to help, or for one thing, give players a tool they can use. Like the GM can actually give the player the page. Like, here's what the public knows about the kaiju, and they can read that and they can get a sense for who it is and what it does. And from the GM point of view, there's lots of personalities. There's lots of different points of view, and lots of different hooks that are just sort of woven into the text that they can use for their campaigns. And that's the goal, like, to make these to make these books as usable both to GMs and to players as possible.
Well, good luck meeting all of those stretch goals, Jonathan. When this episode drops, there will be 21 days left in the Kickstarter. So I'm going to encourage everybody to go over there and check it out and back it. There are several different levels that you can choose from depending on your financial ability. Digital tiers and physical tiers and stuff it's got some bonus things on it, like printable figures and things like that. But we'll have a link to all that in the show notes. We've been going on for quite a while now, so I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. Should have more than enough information to whet your appetite for Mecha versus Kaiju. I'm backing it myself, folks. Putting my money where my mouth is. So go over there and check it out, and check out his Patreon and our Patreon as well while you're over there.
You do good work.
Thanks for thank you. Thanks for joining me today, Jonathan. And again, good luck with your. I mean, it's already funded at the basic level, so that's that first hurdle taken care of.
Yeah, the book is
everything after that is gravy.
Yeah, exactly. And every backer gets the preview copy immediately upon funding. So as soon as the Kickstarter is over, everybody's going to get a copy of that PDF so they can start playing. And timeline for the for printing or the final edition is going to be based on how many stretch goals we meet and how much information we get from our backers.
Yeah, and you're fulfilling that through drive-through RPG, so there's not going to be any big tariff hoo-ha to worry about.
Absolutely, they've got printers in the US. Yeah, they've got printers in the US and Europe. Yeah,
I kickstarted a few things that then, after it was all done, suddenly. This new obstacle was put in their way, so that's no fun at all. So there you go, folks. Go to Kickstarter, follow the link below, and check that out. And then we'll be back here soon with another regular episode. And this next weekend we'll be at Kaiju Go in Dallas, so come find us there and say hello. Until then, I have been your host, Precious D. Remember to keep calm and take shelter in basements. Whatever you do, please don't misuse science. We won't see you, but you will hear us next time on Monster Movie Fun Time Go. You've been listening to Monster Movie Fun Time Go. If you enjoyed the show, please consider rating and reviewing us on your podcasting platform of choice. You can leave us a message and find links to all our things at mmftg.com.